The Watchtower Society teaches that it is wrong to quote an authority out of context. Notice this statement that appeared in the book, Live with Jehovah's Day in Mind.
Who of us has not said or done something unkind and then later been confronted about it? We likely felt embarrassed or somewhat guilty. Such feelings can lead a person to deny an error or offer some explanation that twists the truth in order to excuse the wrong or make it appear correct. Or, in an uncomfortable situation, we might be tempted to mention only selected details, editing them to color the facts. Hence, what we say might technically be true, yet give a totally different impression. While this may not be flagrant lying, such as is common in the world today, is it really speaking truth each one with his neighbor or brother? When a Christian phrases things in such a way that he inwardly knows is leading brothers to a wrong conclusion, to believe something that is really not true, not accurate, how do you think God feels?
Certainly, the organization responsible for such a statement would never be guilty of doing the very thing they warn others about. In fact, governing body member David Splane, in a talk entitled Producing Accurate Publications, in the November 2017 broadcast, made the following statement.
When a writer submits an article for publication, he is expected to supply references from reputable sources to back up the facts that he's included in his article. And our research department will use those references to check the accuracy of everything. Reliable, respected sources. What do we mean by a reliable source? Well, first of all, we go with encyclopedias, books, magazines, and then newspapers, basically in that order. We prefer encyclopedias over books, books over magazines, and magazines over newspapers, generally because newspaper editors have a hard time checking their facts. They have a very limited time in which to check their facts. So even encyclopedias, though, and books get updated, so we have to go with the latest edition of those. We have to make sure that our sources are reliable. Now, when a writer quotes an expert, our researchers will ask, who's this expert? What's his reputation? Is he working for a particular organization? Does this organization have an agenda? Is it a special interest group? If we find that the goals of the organization are questionable, we won't use the quote, even if it's a really good quote. Now, suppose that a writer wants to quote something from a book. In the reference material, he'll supply a photocopy of the quote in the book, but very often he'll give us 2 or 3 pages before the quote and 2 or 3 pages after as well. And that way, our researchers can examine the quote in context to make sure that what we're saying in print is really what the author of the quote had in mind. For example, an evolutionist might make a statement which, on the surface, appears to confirm his support of creation. Or perhaps an atheist will make a statement that seems to indicate that he believes in God. But when you examine the quote in context, you realize that that isn't what the author had in mind at all. We would never deliberately distort a quotation. We try very hard to use all of our quotations in context. Now, it's important to keep up with the very latest research. Something that was stated years ago as a fact may have been disproved. And the reason why is obvious. Someone may spend his entire life researching a very limited point in history, a very small point in history. And of course, if he spends so much time researching, he's going to uncover things. And so it's not surprising that from time to time we have to adjust our view of some historical points. We have to check, check, check.
It sounds very impressive, doesn't it? Clearly, his aim is to inspire confidence in his audience, that whatever comes out in print, in the Society's publications can be completely trusted. Or can it be? He mentions 2 important areas that are necessary in order to achieve accurate publications. First, making sure that a quote is not taken out of context. He assures us that the writer always supplies 2 or 3 pages before and after the quote so that the research team can make sure that the quote is in harmony with what the author had in mind. Second, making sure they keep up with the latest information on the subject. Okay. Let's check and see how well they do. In Jeremiah's prophecy, we read this statement.
For this is what Jehovah says, when 70 years at Babylon are fulfilled, I will turn my attention to you, and I will make good my promise by bringing you back to this place.
In connection with this statement, the June 2012 Awake magazine quotes a leading Israeli archaeologist, Ephraim Stern.
Prophecy 2. In accord with the fulfilling of 70 years at Babylon, I, Jehovah, shall turn my attention to you people, the Jewish exiles, and I will establish toward you my good word in bringing you back to this place, the land of Judah. Jeremiah 29:10. Fulfillment. After 70 years of exile, from 607 to 537 BCE, King Cyrus of Persia released the Jewish captives and allowed them to return to their homeland to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. What history reveals? Did the Israelites remain captive in Babylon for 70 years as the Bible foretold? Note the comments of a leading Israeli archaeologist, Ephraim Stern. From 604 BCE to 538 BCE, there is a complete gap in evidence suggesting occupation. In all that time, not a single town destroyed by the Babylonians was resettled. The so-called gap in which there was no occupation or resettling of conquered territory corresponds closely to Israel's exile in Babylon from 607 to 537 BCE.
The highlighted words shows the quote from Ephraim Stern. Ephraim Stern lived from January 15, 1934 through March 23, 2018 and was an Israeli archaeologist and professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He specialized in the archaeology of ancient Israel and Judah and Phoenicia, and was known for his excavations at Tel Dor, 1980 to 2000. His academic expertise was the late First Temple period, the Babylonian period and the Persian period. He also studied the culture of the Phoenicians. Of course, the purpose of the quote is to support the Watchtower's chronology, that Jerusalem was destroyed by Babylon in 607 BCE, and that the land was completely empty for the next 70 years, from 607 to 537. Here is the context of Mr. Stern's quote, taken from Biblical Archaeology Review, November to December 2000. The Babylonian Gap. The Assyrians and Babylonians both ravaged large parts of ancient Israel, yet the archaeological evidence from the aftermath of their respective conquests tells two very different stories. Why? In 721 BCE, the Assyrians brought an end to the northern kingdom of Israel. A little more than a century later, the Assyrians themselves suffered defeat at the hands of the Babylonians, who became the world's new superpower. The Babylonians were no less bent on mayhem and destruction than the Assyrians had been. In 586 BCE, they burnt Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, bringing an end to the southern kingdom of Judah and 400 years of Davidic rule. As destroyers, the Assyrians and Babylonians had much in common. But the periods that followed their conquest could not be less alike. While the Assyrians left a clear imprint of their presence in Palestine, there is a strange gap after the Babylonian destruction. Call it an archaeological gap, if you wish. The savage Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem is well documented both in the Bible, in the books of Jeremiah and Lamentations, and in the archaeological record. When Nebuchadnezzar first placed the city under siege in 597 BCE, the city quickly capitulated, thereby avoiding a general destruction. But in response to a revolt by Judah's king Zedekiah, Nebuchadnezzar dispatched an army that, after an 18-month siege, captured and destroyed the city in 586 BCE. The evidence of this destruction is widely confirmed in Jerusalem excavations. On his first swing through Judah, Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed much of Philistia, Ekron, Tel Batash, Tel Jemeh, Rukish and Tel Sarah. Particularly devastated was Ashkelon, which the Babylonians sacked in 604 BCE. Similar evidence of Babylonian destruction can be found throughout the Beersheba Valley, in the Arava, the valley south of the Dead Sea, and in the Jordan River Valley. From south to north, we can trace the effects of Babylonian might, at Tel el-Khalifa on the coast of the Red Sea, at Ein Gedi on the shore of the Dead Sea, and further north at Dan, the source of the Jordan River. The same is true in excavations at major northern sites, Hazor, Megiddo, overlooking the Jezreel Valley, and Dor, on the Mediterranean coast, and in central Judah, where, in addition to Jerusalem, we may look at Ramat Rahel and Lachish, among other sites. But the strange thing is that, above the remains left by these destructions, we find no evidence of occupation until the Persian period, which began in about 538 BCE. For roughly half a century, from 604 BCE to 538 BCE, there is a complete gap in evidence suggesting occupation. In all that time, not a single town destroyed by the Babylonians was resettled. This is true even of the old Assyrian fortresses along the Way of the Sea, the Via Maris. They were reoccupied only in the Persian period, as shown by the recently excavated fort, at Rishon LeZion. A few things can be pointed out here. First, you will notice that Stern does not hold to a 607 BCE date for the destruction of Jerusalem. According to him, this did not take place until 586 BCE. Also notice that in 604 BCE, Stern reports that the destruction brought by Babylon was not limited solely to Israelite cities but those of the Philistines and Assyria as well. The point he is making is, the 604 BCE to 538 BCE span of time is the entire period of Babylonian dominance over all the nations, from the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's capture and destruction of Ashkelon, until the fall of Babylon to the Persians. During that time, the Babylonians did not resettle any of these cities, but left them waste. Since he states that Nebuchadnezzar does not begin to come against Jerusalem until 597 BCE, 7 years later, it is clear from his dates, that Stern is saying this gap in archaeological evidence included the time while kings were still ruling in Jerusalem. The Society confuses this with the period of time they believe the Jews were exiled in Babylon after the destruction of Jerusalem. As quoted by the Society, Stern said, "Not a single town destroyed by the Babylonians was resettled." This gives the impression that these cities were not resettled by Israelites. But the complete gap in evidence Stern is talking about is for that indicating, not Israelite, but Babylonian occupation in the conquered territories. He did not mean to say that the entire area was left empty. Rather, as regards the conquered peoples, wherever the Babylonians wrought destruction, they themselves did not occupy the cities. Those places usually stayed that way till the reign of the Persians. In support of that, here is Ephraim Stern, writing in the May/June 2002 issue of Biblical Archaeology Review. I have never claimed that the land was entirely emptied, and it is very likely that, here and there, rural settlements remained, as attested in surveys and excavations. But what political or other significance can a defeated population have, when it has no significant urban centers, when its religious center has been burned down, when its primary trade routes no longer exist, and when it no longer has its own government? Although I have not claimed that the land was entirely abandoned, distinctions must be made between fundamentally different population densities. When my family arrived in the land of Israel in 1800, for example, there were 300,000 inhabitants on both sides of the Jordan. Today there are some 13 to 14 million people living there. Still, it cannot be said that the land was empty in 1800, only that it was sparsely populated. Does this mean the Bible is wrong? No. It actually agrees with Jeremiah's prophecy. When Jeremiah spoke to the people, he told them that, not just the Jews but all the nations in the region would have to serve the king of Babylon for 70 years.
I am sending for all the families of the north, declares Jehovah, sending for King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, my servant, and I will bring them against this land, and against its inhabitants, and against all these surrounding nations. I will devote them to destruction, and make them an object of horror, and something to whistle at, and a perpetual ruin. I will put an end to the sound of exultation, and the sound of rejoicing from them, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the sound of the handmill and the light of the lamp. and all this land will be reduced to ruins and will become an object of horror. And these nations will have to serve the king of Babylon for 70 years.
When did Jeremiah utter these words? Verse 1 tells us,
The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, the king of Judah, which was the 1st year of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon.
What else happened in that year?
For Egypt, concerning the army of Pharaoh Necho, the king of Egypt, who was along the Euphrates River, and was defeated at Carchemish by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, the king of Judah.
In the 3rd year of the kingship of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. In time, Jehovah gave King Jehoiakim of Judah into his hand, along with some of the utensils of the house of the true God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. He placed the utensils in the treasury of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief court official, to bring some of the Israelites, including those of royal and noble descent. They were to be youths without any defect, of good appearance, endowed with wisdom, knowledge, and discernment, and capable of serving in the king's palace. He was to teach them the writing and the language of the Chaldeans.
So, in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, which is his 3rd year, according to Daniel, because he uses the Babylonian reckoning, Judah became subject to Nebuchadnezzar in his 1st year. But Jerusalem and its temple was not destroyed until Nebuchadnezzar's 19th year.
And in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, that is to say, the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the chief of the bodyguard, the servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. And he proceeded to burn the house of Jehovah, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and the house of every great man he burned with fire.
Obviously, the 70 years mentioned by Jeremiah included more than the time of Jerusalem's destruction. What this society does not reveal is that there is another possible translation of Jeremiah's statement. For thus says the Lord, when 70 years have been completed for Babylon, I will visit you and fulfill my good word to you, to bring you back to this place. Jeremiah 29:10, NASB. For the Lord says, only when the 70 years of Babylonian rule are over will I again take up consideration for you. Then I will fulfill my gracious promise to you and restore you to your homeland. Jeremiah 29:10, the Net Bible. This rendering shifts the focus of the 70 years from being the period of time of Jerusalem's bondage, to the period of Babylon's dominance in the region. This perfectly harmonizes with the archaeological information provided by Stern. However, if the society were to accept this translation, it would mean they would have to admit that Jerusalem was destroyed in 587-586, not 607 BCE. This would upset their entire chronological structure leading to 1914. The date C.T. Russell gave great significance to, over 100 years ago, as the end of the Gentile times, the date Jehovah's Witnesses are told Jesus is said to have been enthroned invisibly in heaven as king. What is completely mind-boggling is this is exactly how the verse is rendered in the Swedish version of the New World Translation. Why the difference? Is there something the Swedish witnesses know that the rest of the organization doesn't?
Now, it's important to keep up with the very latest research. Something that was stated years ago as a fact may have been disproved. And the reason why is obvious. Someone may spend his entire life researching a very limited point in history, a very small point in history. And of course, if he spends so much time researching, he's going to uncover things. And so it's not surprising that from time to time we have to adjust our view of some historical points. We have to check.
In an article entitled, When Was Ancient Jerusalem Destroyed? Part 2, the Watchtower admits, at present, the majority of secular historians believe that Jerusalem was destroyed in 587 BCE. However, a note on page 23 states, none of the secular experts, quoted in this article, hold that Jerusalem was destroyed in 607 BCE. You would think that, if there was at least one secular historian that held to the 607 BCE date, the magazine would have quoted him. Will the society adjust their view of this period of history? Only time will tell. But let's just put all this together. First, there is the lack of any secular expert, many devoting years of their lives to this one period of history. Second, we have them seriously misquoting this important archaeologist. Third, we have solid evidence that adjusting to what historians have uncovered would not contradict the Bible. With all of that, we have to ask, since they are so diligent in producing accurate publications, why haven't they made the change already? What could possibly be holding them back? It couldn't possibly be for the reasons outlined in the January 22, 1962 issue of Awake. You may readily admit that you are not infallible, but when it comes to acknowledging an error, do you strive to make people think you are? When confronted with a mistake, do you stoutly argue that it is not an error, when in your heart you know that it is? Do you strive to twist the facts, in order to justify what you have done, rather than to admit humbly that you were wrong? Some persons are so stubborn in this respect, that they never change their story. They will never admit an error.